Okay, here we go. We have Jorge Valdes, who was at one time one of the biggest drug traffickers in the U.S. during the 70s and 80s, but has a very interesting story along the way, especially where he is right now in life. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Vlad. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Okay, so this is our first time sitting down, so I want to get into your whole story. So you originally were born in Cuba.
Yeah, I was born in a little town called Santiago de Las Vegas, just right outside of Havana, Cuba. And
Okay.
yeah, and in 1966, my mother was very, very religious person. My father, he was just your typical Catholic man. He'd take us to mass and pick us up. But my mother was very adamant that she did not want her children to grow up in a communist regime. So we go to school and then it's like, God doesn't exist, God don't exist, God don't exist. We come home, God is everything, God is everything. And if you look at the little towns in Cuba, literally the entire town is all surrounded around the church. So my mother said, no, we're leaving. My father was one of the wealthiest men in Cuba, so he had no desire. He was 40, did not speak the language. My mother did. And October 11, 1966, early in the morning, she picks us up and she's like, get up. We're going to Miami. I'm like in shock. I had no idea we are going anywhere. Just went to bed like every other night. And so I went to pack some things and she's like, no, just the clothes on your back. So we head to the airport. I'm in a daze. I have no clue what is going on. But we get to the airport and we're waiting for our name to be called out. And when they called us out, I see my mom and dad go to the counter, and I see my mom coming back crying, and my father like, I'm not going. I'm not going. And my mother is like, she comes up to me and she grabs my hand. She grabs my brother's hand. My brother was 9, I was 10. My sister was 6. She was 5. And she said, George, take him to Miami. I'll be with you someday. And I'm telling you now, I became like hypnotized. I had no clue what was going on. My world literally shattered. It's like, if the reason we're leaving is because of my mom and she's staying behind, will we ever see her again? All these things go through her mind. So I'm walking to the tarmac because my father's not coming. And as I start to get on the airplane, I see my father coming. And we get to Miami, and it was a shock. We lived in a house that was 1 square block. We had TV. And all of a sudden, 11 of us are sleeping in a 1-bedroom apartment in Little Havana, probably 700 square feet. In the floor, writing down one time we're going to piss because everyone had to get up to go to work or go to school. So my world literally, I say that, I look at my life like in 2 cataclysmic moments. That was the first one. First decision that I made right off the bat is, God's not real. Fidel was right all the time. My mom is just crazy. She has no idea. And, if there is a God, it's going to be me. I'm going to make him out to be. But, we had tremendous principles, tremendous morals. And I worked very, very hard, and I went to school, and I always hated to be second at anything. I used to say the person in second is the first loser. So I worked very, very hard, went to school. My mother came in 1969 at the end. In 1966, towards the end of the year, and things got a little better for us, but then she was very, very sick. She had thyroid problem. They thought first she had throat cancer. So we literally went without food. We went without anything. I remember my dad, I remember one time, all we would get for breakfast would be just a glass of milk with this powdered milk from Vietnam. So today I can drink no milk. And it would not mix. And my dad would throw in 2 raw eggs, and that was it. That was our food till nighttime. And not much at night.
Well, I just want to touch on something before we get off this topic. Castro took over Cuba in 1959.
Correct.
And you moved in 1966.
Correct.
Now, you were 10 years old, so I know you don't remember a ton of everything, but what exactly was happening when Castro took over Cuba and started, establishing the whole communist regime and so forth there?
The interesting thing for us as little kids, we didn't know much, right? Because we went to school, and every kid, the thing in Cuba was that every kid went to the same school. So there was no kids in private school, public school, better school. I mean, all the schools were identically the same. To us, our life had not changed much because at the beginning of the revolution, things did not change drastically. And if they did, I didn't notice as a kid. We still had our cars. We went to the beach. And my mother applied in 1962 to leave. But because we were very wealthy, we didn't even get to go till 1966. I mean, literally, they inventory your entire house. If you were missing a spoon, you were not going. So for us, school was a happy moment, and he stressed a lot of important in sports. In Cuba, you had to swim before first grade. Otherwise, I think your parents go to jail. And, I was a great athlete. I was a great ball player. In the block where I lived the best baseball player in the history of Cuba. And I remember him coming out before going to the park and playing with us on the streets, and then sometimes taking us to the park. So life for me couldn't tell no different in Cuba prior to Castro, which I would have been 4, and then when I left.
Got it. Okay. So now you're growing up in the United States, in Miami, and you're living in Little Havana, right?
Correct.
And you end up in the University of Miami. And while you're there, you want to actually get into accounting.
Right. Well, it even goes before that. So in 1969, we were really struggling, couldn't make it. So my mother said, we're going to move to New Jersey. And so we packed and we moved to New Jersey, went to live in Jersey City. I, again, lived in the ghetto of the ghetto. But I went to Hudson Catholic, and I was, a straight A student. And then in 1972, we decided we want to move back to Miami. My parents had saved enough money to buy a little bitty house. And I came. Cubans just can't stand the cold weather, so we had to leave. So we came to Miami, and a friend of my dad worked for the Federal Reserve Bank. And he knew that I was really good in accounting. So he went up to the vice president there and said, listen, I got this kid. He's really sharp, 17 years old, honest, doesn't do drugs, doesn't smoke, perfect record. He'd be a great employee. And I went to work for them in 1973. I just turned 17 years old. I was the youngest employee in the history of the Federal Reserve Bank at the age of 17. And at the same time, I was working full-time and going to University of Miami full-time, because that's what our generation did, right? Our generation, like I tell my kids, listen, if you work really hard today, you have so much of an advantage, because my generation, we work full-time, and a lot of us were executives, bank executive, worked for big corporation, went to school at night. We went to get our degree full-time. So my life for 4 years was just the same. I can tell you hour for hour what I did from Monday through Monday, from 1973 to 1976.
Okay, so you're going to school, and you have a professor named Jack Snay.
Yes.
And he had an accounting business, but he didn't speak any Spanish. So he had you start handling some of his Spanish clients.
Right. So he come up to me, and he said, George, I was the number 1 student in his class. He said, I think that you want to go into business by yourself. He was a partner of Price & Waterhouse, moved to Miami, didn't speak Spanish. I said that he didn't speak the language of heaven. So he said, if you do my Spanish clients, I will give you an office, secretary, copy machine, everything you want to start your own business. And to me, that was like heaven opened up. It was the first time anybody ever did anything for me. And I felt, my dad didn't want me to leave the bank. He thought I had a great career, which I did. But my mother was like, you're never going to get nowhere working for somebody. So you need to go work for yourself if that's what you want. And I did. And I left, and I went to work for Jack, literally as my own accounting office. And I was subcontracting his Spanish clients.
Okay. And one of your first clients was a little grocery store called La Puerta del Sol.
Yeah. And so now, get this scenario. So I had the same girlfriend for 3 years. If I ever went to a party and I saw anyone smoking marijuana, which was very, very prevalent in the mid-70s, I would leave. And my girlfriend was like, well, you don't smoke it. Why are we leaving? I work for the Federal Reserve Bank. I can't be around any of those people. I'm going somewhere in life. My whole goal was, I'm going to graduate from Miami at 20. I'm going to go to law school. I'm going to graduate by 24. And by the age of 30, I'm going to be a millionaire. That was literally my game plan since the day I came from Cuba. So I was just focused on that. Didn't go to parties, never did drugs. All the alcohol in my life that I drank fit in a teacup. So I was like, when you think about a nerd, if there's a picture of a nerd in the internet and the encyclopedia, it'd be my picture. That's how it was. So imagine I walk into this little grocery store, and imagine it's about 30 feet wide by maybe 70 feet long. Your typical shopping center, strip shopping centers. I need to clarify that because people, I say strip, and because of my accent, people think I'm talking about a strip joint. So it was just one of those strip stores, and I went to work for them, and it was quite an experience.
Well, La Puerta del Sol was the original drug front for the Medellín drug cartel.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, so I'll reveal this on your TV. there was no Medellin drug cartel. So that's something that's really interesting. No one's ever talked about this. That was a name that the Americans gave us because we were about originally, well, let me start then with La Puerta Sol. So the Puerta Sol, when I go there, the first Monday, they walk me to the back. Now, this is 1976. And I had a little office, and I see this paper bag, and it had $100,000. And I'm like, what the hell? Impossible that the store makes so much money. Come back next week. Didn't say nothing. Very naive. Come back next week, $75,000. Now, I'm beginning to wonder, like, really what's going on here? Never even crossed my mind that these people were drug dealers. Finally, the third week, when I showed up and there was like 110, I'm like, no, I got to talk to this guy. So I called the owner, and I'm like, bro, come here, man. You know, you buy a can of soup for $1, and I'm looking at a Campbell soup over there that's been in the shelf for about 10 years because it's got dust all over it. I said, and you sell it for $3, you make $2 profit. In the last 3 weeks, I've counted almost 300 grand. That means you must have spent at least 100,000, but I counted everything you bought, and it's like 1,400 bucks. How are you doing this? And he said, I tell people when I speak, listen, I didn't know nothing about Jesus multiplying the fish and the bread. If I did, I would say he had nothing on this Colombian man because they didn't have nothing and they were making millions. He said, he looked at me straight in the eye and says, well, yeah, we're drug dealers. And I'm like, you know what? He said, yeah, we sell cocaine. And I tell people, I was shocked. I was shocked for about 10 seconds because that's how quickly he came to tell me that, hey, as long as you don't break the law, as long as you don't do anything with drugs, and, we need to go back to 76. It was a different stigma, right? Cocaine was not even on the DEA radar because who consumed cocaine? The rich and famous. It didn't trickle down to like it is today. So when you're selling a kilo of cocaine for $70,000 and a house in Miami, a great, good-looking, middle class, 4-bedroom, 3-bath is $20,000, who can afford that, right? So it was for the rich and famous, the Hollywood celebrity. And when I looked at him, and he's like, you work for the Federal Reserve Bank, right? And I said, yeah. He said, don't you know how to open bank accounts, foreign bank accounts? And I'm like, well, I happen to do. And he's like, well, we can't take our money back to Colombia because of currency restrictions. So we like to open foreign bank accounts to save our money. And he said, how much? Now, I had no clue what it would cost. All I knew is that roughly there was an attorney in Grand Cayman because we did an audit at the Federal Reserve Bank of a bank that had a daisy chain going. And we knew that the way they were paying the loan in Miami when it became due was through a loan in Grand Cayman through a number company. So I'm like, it's about $10,000. And he's like, well, good. I won 3. And I was shocked. I'm like, what? I knew it cost about $700. I said that just to get him out of my head. I didn't even know why. And I'm like, so I'm acting like this big tough guy. I'm just 21 years old. Not even 21 years old. And he's like, just take all that money that we had this week, open us 3 accounts. So I went and I opened 3 accounts for them and made $28,000. Now, imagine, I'm working for the First Reserve Bank. I got a big, big government salary, and I'm making $3.75 an hour, when the minimum wage was, I think, 90 cents. So all of a sudden, I made $28,000, and I tell people, it's like my world began to change because all of it now, here I am, my circle of influence is different, right? Now I'm hanging out with people that have money, people of influence. And it took about 3 months when they began to say, listen, we really want you to handle all of our operations in the U.S.
Even though you guys weren't calling it the Medellin Drug Cartel, that's essentially who they were doing business with, right?
Well, actually, this group was composed of 4 people and me. This group was the group that became known as the Medellin Drug Cartel. Because the Medellin Drug Cartel didn't get his name until 1980. We're in 1976. We were way before even Pablo Escobar even surfaced. We were selling 500 kilos of cocaine in 1977 when nobody even knew literally what cocaine was. We're doing $100 million a month. So out of our group, really out of the head of the group, Manuel Garces, who I consider my godfather, and out of him, then in Medellin, started to surface different groups like Pablo Escobar, the Ochoa brothers, Gacha, and really a couple other guys that no one has ever mentioned that was probably even bigger than them. See, we know about Pablo because how notorious he became. But in reality, all the money he said that he made and all the billions and trillions, listen, if you listen to my indictment, they think I made $1 trillion. And it's a bit exaggerated. I mean, we made a lot of money, don't get me wrong.
Okay, so Pablo Escobar wasn't in the picture at this point.
No, he didn't even come into the picture until 1980, 81.
Okay. Well, eventually, Medellin would import 95% of the cocaine into the U.S.
Well, and that's exactly the number the government accused me of importing. So within 3 months, they started asking me, and they're asking me and asking me, and I just need to get rid of them. So I came up with this great idea. I'm going to tell them, listen, I don't work for anybody. You want me to be partners with you? Want me to run everything for you in the United States? Good. I want equal share. I want 20%, and you got to put up my money. Now, mind you, Colombia did not produce cocaine at this time. They were bringing it in from Peru and Bolivia, and it was costing about $23,000 a kilo, 1976. So $23,000 a kilo, and we started bringing 100 kilos. That's 2.3 million. So my part of that is about 500,000. 500,000. I didn't even know that much money existed in this world. So I made that stupid offer, thinking that, here they're going to look at this kid. He's got braces. He's just a young kid, and they're going to kick my ass all the way from Colombia to the United States. And I remember the day I made in that proposition, I went to the hotel, and I was like so at ease, because it was really beginning to bother me. It was like every second, you got to do this, you got to do this. Well, I went to the hotel, and when they came to pick me up in the morning, they said, well, Manuel wants to see you. And I'm like, well, maybe he forgot to tell me something, because we had a shipping company going on. And I got to his office, and they were all him and the other 3 partners. And he said, we really thought a lot about, and I mean, I got petrified. I'm like, man, these people are going to kill me. They're going to insult the hell out of me. I don't know what, but at least this chapter of my life is over. And he's like, we accept. And I'm like, well, good. And now, imagine, here I am, 21 years old. All of a sudden, I never even seen what cocaine looks like. I'm going to be in charge of importing all these kilos of cocaine. How do you bring it in? How do you sell it? Who do I sell it to? How do you collect the money? Where do we move the money? Well, within 6 months, I was bringing in 400 or 500 kilos. I was making between $1 and $3 million a month. And when I got it in 1979, well, so we started doing that, and we grew and grew and grew, and we're bringing it up to 1,000 kilos. We're doing $100 million a month. And in 1979, I got approached by one of my workers, and he's like, hey, the Bolivian government wants to make a deal with you. And I'm like, well, what's that? Well, we can buy it in Bolivia for $10,000 versus $23 in Colombia, and they're willing to give you 1 on credit on top of whatever you buy. So I thought, okay, I'm making $3 million a month. Now I can go ahead and make $7 million, maybe 2-3 times a month. And it wasn't about the money, Well, I thought when people say, what is the hardest thing you give up? The money was nothing. It was that power. And I remember we worked out this deal with Bolivia. And when the trip went to go down, I went to Colombia to show the strip to the pilots. And I sent my right-hand guy over to Bolivia. And when all was said, I was going to Nicaragua because I had business with Somoza. And he was going to put me on a jet to go to the Dominican Republic, pick up my ex-wife. I'm going to Europe. He called me up, and he says, George, they betrayed you. And I'm like, what? He said, the only cocaine here is the one you paid for. So I got on an airplane. Now, I just turned 23 years old. I get on an airplane. I go to this guy, and now this guy is one of the most powerful men in the world, overthrown 5 governments, right? And I'm like, listen, if you ever screw me again, I'm going to kill you. And he looked at me. Well, my right-hand guy that was with me literally peed in his pants. And the guy looked at me and said, man, you got the biggest set of balls, or you're the biggest idiot I ever seen in my life. Next time you say that, I will kill you. So, but we became great friends. And I left. I had to go to Nicaragua. Couldn't make it on a commercial flight. And I got on the airplane. We landed in Colombia. Everything was fine. My godfather was having a heart attack. He's like, what are you doing? Are you crazy? How can you get on the airplane? You know how much you can handle all of our money. Literally, by that time now, I had accounts in Switzerland, Grand Cayman, Liechtenstein. I knew all the ministers of finance of all these countries. We had a very intriguing web. So he's like, if something happens to you, we're done. And I'm like, don't worry, nothing's going to happen to me. Well, half an hour later, we crashed over the jungles of Panama. And when we crashed, the police came. And, here's the thing, because I look back on my life, and as you create a God complex, right? You think that nothing's going to happen to you because you're walking around life, and it happens to celebrity, it happens to athletes, and everyone's telling you how great you are, no matter what the hell you do, and you think there's nothing you could do that can go wrong. And what I should have done at that moment is paid, because I had $200,000 cash in my briefcase that I traveled with, paid the little sergeant there in the little town outside of Costa Rica and tell him, listen, I got cocaine inside the airplane. He couldn't see it because the airplane landed like cliff dive. So you have to get a ladder to get out there. We literally jumped like 10 feet to get down. I didn't say nothing. I said, look, can you take our passports and get them stamped legally? I'm going to have someone come tomorrow to see if they can fix the airplane, and then we're going to leave. He said, sure. I gave him $100. He was happier than heck. I made a call. We had paid over $1 million to elect the president of Costa Rica this time. So we knew that we had tremendous connection there. We're about 25 miles. And the guy in charge of the pilot said to me, George, take the flare gun and blow this son of a bitch up. And I'm like, are you out of your freaking mind? There's $7 million in there. Now, $7 million, not a lot. Now it's a lot of money. 76, 79, it was a lot of money. So he's like, I said, I'm not going to blow it up. We're going to get it to Costa Rica, and we'll figure it out from there. Next morning, we go to pick up our passports. I had a driver already come from Costa Rica, and lo and behold, I saw a DEA agent, United States Consul. I mean, they were like, the room was loaded with people. And I knew, man, the shit hit the fan. I'm like, this is done. We're done. So they take us into a room, and they put us in front. They had all the cocaine on this table, took all these pictures. I tell the consul general from Panama, I said, look, I need to call my attorney. He says, attorney? He said, you're in Panama, man. This is over here, Napoleonic law. You're guilty until you prove yourself innocent. They can hold you a year without a phone call. I'm like, all right. I knew that sooner or later, someone important was going to come see me. I mean, I was very, very fluent in the world. I mean, we're buying presidents during this time. We're spending $1 million in corruption every month. So sure enough, 2 days later, the attorney general comes. And I looked at him, I said, look, don't waste your time and mine. All I want to know is two things. How much to get my cocaine back? How much to get out of here? He's like, Noriega already sold you cocaine, $250,000 for you to get out. I said, I gave him a number. I said, use this code and use this number, and your money will be here tomorrow. Sure enough, 2 days later, he comes and said, the money's here. We're going to fly you to Panama City. They're going to rough you up a little bit in front of the DEA just to make you look good, and you stick to your story that you were looking for, you were actually selling guns to the Sandinistas. And I'm like, good. So we did that, and they took us to the little office. They sat us on these benches across the wall, and then they brought this little Panamanian kid, couldn't have been no more than 100 pounds soaking wet, 5'4", naked, threw him in the floor, and took a broomstick and stuck it up his anus, and literally blood just splattered all over the place. They looked at me and says, he only had 40 pounds of pot. And there's two pilots that were bigger than life, 6'4", 6'5", they cracked. And they started to tell him, not only was I not dealing with arms, I was the biggest drug dealer in the world at that time. He said, but I just bribed the attorney general. So they took them apart and took me and this guy, Harold, into a dungeon. And then they went and tortured us for 25 days, naked, cattle prod to our testicles. They beat us senseless till we pass out. We come to life, and they beat us again 2-3 times. Hey, tell them. But the interesting thing is, this is one of the things that biggest upsets me. A lot of people say, why do you get so upset when people lie? I said, because there's something in my head that truth matters. And something in my head that says, I laid in the floor of a freaking Panamanian jail, being tortured, where every time I went to a bathroom for 5 years, I passed blood because I was not willing to break my word, to break my honor, even though I was convinced that most of the people I was covering for would betray me one day, and it did. But that was the thing. Like I told my kids, I didn't do it for them. I did it because I live my life in a certain way. I don't care what I do. People can say, George is loud, he's obnoxious, he's this and that, but no one's going to say that your father is not a man. And I'd rather die than give up my honor, because all I have in this earth, I have no control whether I'm rich or poor, sick or alive, dead. I mean, living in this time more than ever. But I have absolutely control of one thing in life, my word. And I was not willing to break that word. So for 30 days, they torture us in ways that you can never, ever imagine. No food, just drip of water, no toilets or nothing, just a dirty, stinking floor in this dungeon. And eventually my fear, because people have always said, you've never feared anything. I said, no. I said, the only thing I ever feared in my life was this one time in Panama. I fear losing my mind because there was a prisoner across the cell from me, and he spent all day licking the bar. And I'm like, God, you got to. I mean, I didn't believe in God. I said, you got to kill me, but I'm not going to lose my mind. So my defense was I started cursing the officer. I started saying, listen, tell Noriega that if he doesn't kill me, I'm going to get out of here. He knows I got the power. I'm going to rape his wife, rape his daughter right in front of him. I'm going to cut him in pieces, and then I'm going to kill him. Well, I knew that either he's going to do something about it or he's going to come and just kill me. And sure enough, 2 days later, he shows up. And when he shows up laughing. He's like, why are you mad at me? Two things. I didn't tell on you, number one. And number two, you paid the wrong guy. And I'm like, how much? He says $250. I said, damn, can't you guys come up with a different price? It was 4 guys for $250. Now it's 2 guys for $250. Is that a standard going price? So I told him the same thing. I said, look, take this number, call, and you have the money here in a day or two. And sure enough, then he came and said, look, I'm sending you to Costa Rica. Bought tickets for Costa Rica, showed them to us. And they took us to, well, first of all, they put us against this wall, and with fire hydrant hoses began to wash us down because the blood and the stench on us was horrific. And I don't know what hurt more, the tortures or the wash down. But we were waiting for the airport to go to Costa Rica, and Interpol came, about 30 agents, and threw us in an airplane to Miami. And I got to Miami, and I was charged with heading the largest drug conspiracy in the world. I was given $7 million bond, and I just turned 23 years old. And I had no clue why they would come up with that because no one knew anything about me. It took me years to find out that my attorney had betrayed me. But until then, it was like, because one of the things about my life that a lot of people never heard, except for the government, is that I run this like a business. I didn't run it like most drug dealers run it, where to them it's a big party and they're out there with a fanfare. And literally what they're doing is just, flaunting all that drug money right in their face of the agents. And I said, look, you can win a battle. You're not going to win the war. So there's never been a wiretap of me. There's never been a picture of me with a compromising individual. And I went to my office 8 o'clock in the morning every day and left at 6, 7 o'clock.
But before this whole bust happened, when you were basically getting into the whole drug dealing thing and kept moving up the ranks in it, you were making tons and tons of money. I guess you had bought a $7 million ranch.
Yeah, I mean, I lived a life that you have so much money. I remember one time my maid is cleaning behind my couch, and she said, can you move the couch so I can sweep behind? I said, sure. And we moved the couch, and there's a bag with $750,000. I had no clue how long that bag had been there or anything. Now, think about it. This is 1977 money. It's not 2019. So I had a mansion everywhere I went. That's the first thing. I bought a big old mansion. I had a fleet of airplanes, yachts. I dated the most beautiful woman in America. I mean, the first guy to bring massive amounts of cocaine to California. I remember the first time we brought cocaine to California, they wanted to mix it with heroin to mix people. They didn't even know what cocaine was for. So.
Okay. You also had a helicopter?
Yeah, I had a Jet Ranger helicopter. I lived in a $10 million ranch. I had a house on the ocean, a house in Vail, Colorado. I was living the life. And then I had a big old mansion in Colombia. I had one in Dominican Republic. I used to tell people that I don't like to travel with a suitcase. So I just buy a house wherever I go and just leave clothes there.
What was the most amount of money that you actually had in front of you at that time?
I remember one time, which is actually when my mother found out that I was a drug dealer. Because until then, my mother thought that I was a businessman. I've always been traveling. I've always been doing deals. And she had no clue. So when I went to Europe that one time, and in my parents' house, I had a room. And I told my guys, look, whatever you collect this month, just put it there. Just leave it there. Now, at that time, there's no counting machines. You got to count by hand because you can't take a chance on counterfeit. So all of the things, one by one, bills by bills, in stacks of 5,000. So I came back from Europe after 30 days, and right in front of me was like, at that time, in that $35, $40 million. I know that we're doing anywhere between $50 to $100 million a month, every month.
Okay. So how much cash have you ever seen in front of you at one time?
50 million, 70 million.
50 to 70 million in cash. How much space is that?
In $100 bills, it takes about 600 square feet. Literally floor to ceiling. Yeah.
600 square feet of cash, $100 bills from floor to ceiling.
Yeah, it's a massive amount of money.
Okay.
The worst part is counting it. Think about how mad you get with how horrible life must be that you're mad about having to count $60 million.
Well, in the drug game, it's not like a legal business where people play by the rules. You could sue people. There's government oversight and so forth. People are constantly ripping you off, trying to rip you off. You know, you see, for example, movies like Scarface, where his first drug deal ended up in a bloodbath. Number one, how often would people try to rip you off, or they rip off shipments, or, you know, that type of thing?
Okay. Between 1976 that I got involved and 1979 I went to prison, and I came out in 85. Never got ripped off $1. To us, I mean, you talk about you don't have anything written down, right? You're not keeping records. Literally, you're just keeping some numbers in a very, very intricate manner. But you're doing all this on a handshake. And I tell people, I said, some of the most honest people, you know, listen, we did horrible things, but we were the most honest human being you ever know. I said, we did $100 million on a handshake. If you dropped a bag with one of my guys and you would say, hey, there's $1,500,000 there, and we counted and it was $1,400,000, we just write it down $1,400,000. There was no questions asked. If it was $1,550,000, it was $1,550,000, and that's how we dealt. The cocaine business, prior to Pablo Escobar and things changing with the cocaine cowboy deal and that killing in Miami at the Kendall, was very, very, very different. These people were business people. The original founders of the cartel were people that went to church, believe it or not, people that had legitimate businesses. They were not the thugs that we're used to seeing. You know, the scene changed a lot. With Scarface ushers in the Mariel boat lift, right? When Castro emptied out his prisons with all these people that were literally animals. I mean, to think about it, I mean, and good people came in the Mariel boat lift. But if you think about this, they're the only people on earth to take over 2 United States penitentiary, and they were in lockdown. They took over Lewisburg and Atlanta in lockdown. I heard stories from guards that they would walk by, and literally the guys would cut the thumb off and throw it at the guards to intimidate them. So when these people came over and they're starting to see this, these are people that have been in Castro's prison since they were kids. Every single one who could read and write and mathematics, like you have no idea. But they were literally like animals. So it became very, very, very violent with that wave. And that's what happened when I came out of prison in 84. And I'm looking at the world has drastically changed. It's not the world that I was involved with. Number one, you know, I remember being offered one time by one of the big crime families to trade him heroin for cocaine. And shows me all these numbers, how I can make so much more money, and they were going to make speedballs. And I'm like, you know, I'm sorry, I don't get involved in a crime that kills children. And that was my mindset. Literally, that's how I thought. My godfather, the original founder of the cartel, said, if you ever have to carry a gun to deal with someone, you got no business dealing with that person. And that was the mindset that I grew up to that period when things drastically changed that you see in Scarface. And by the way, the guy in Scarface that comes to kill Tony Montana, that was my partner in Bolivia. And people said that there was some reference to Scarface from my story because I had a cougar and Tony Montana had a tiger. We both went to the same club. There's a book called Hotel Scarface, a great, great book. And it depicts that whole life, how Cubans, we took over Miami with the cocaine business. Literally, because Miami was nothing but a little ghost town. You know, Jewish people, older people went there to die, and prostitutes and hookers lived there. You know, we came and all of a sudden we're pumping. It was said that during my time, when I was in charge of the cartel, the Federal Reserve Bank in Miami had more money than all the Federal Reserve banks in the country. So we rebuilt the entire city.
You work out a deal with Noriega. You give him $250,000 to get out of this dungeon. And I guess at that point, the U.S. was working with Noriega.
He was working he was a DA, working for the DA and working for us. That's the
Right.
interesting thing about Noriega. He was double dipping.
Later on, the U.S. actually ended up invading Noriega and then locking him up. How did you feel when you heard, years later about what happened in Noriega?
Well, how do I feel when I walk into the same prison and I'm in the yard and here he is in this cell right in front of me, looking like a monkey in a cage with his little orange suit. I walked out to him and I said, General, you remember me? You don't look as tough as you used to look with that military uniform. And didn't say a word to me or anything like that. Look, the thing about it with me, that was, I didn't look at anything personal. I knew one thing. Listen, this is the business that I am involved with. We recruited hundreds of people because we were probably the most powerful criminal organization on earth ever in history. And I used to tell people, ain't it funny? I used to recruit people and I would tell them, listen, you're going to live a hell of a life, but here's the end of your career. You will die or you will die in a federal prison. Now, you sure you want to join? And people would. And people say, well, why? I say, you know why? Because we were real. We would die for each other. I remember getting a call in the middle of the night, about 3 o'clock in the morning, and my right-hand guy, it was during a time in Miami when a group of cops got together with drug dealers and they were kidnapping people, little kidnapping families. So they would kidnap your mom and in a police car. They would say, ma'am, we have a problem with your license, put in the police car, take it away. Then they would call your dad and say, we know that you brought in a load, your son brought in a load last week. We want $1 million by tomorrow, we're going to kill your mom. So it was very, very tense. So this guy that worked for me, he's literally in this neighborhood in Miami, bust into these people's house to hide. And they're so audacious that they're going door to door, shooting him down, looking for him. He calls me. Now, I'm about 10 blocks away. We had 30 bodyguards. But at that time, you think I'm going to, okay, let me make a phone call. I'll send someone to help you. I got in a car. I had a Bronco at that time, and one of my cars. And I get in the car, and I'm driving in the sidewalk. And I drive to the house, and the people are about maybe 8 houses behind. And I get in the car, open the door, and he jumps in, and they shoot the car down. It looked like 28 rounds, looked like a strainer. And I didn't get a scratch. And I tell people, the thing with us is we were real. We're willing to die for each other. If someone went, why no one would rat me out? Well, if someone went to prison, they knew 2 things. Number one, I'm going to buy the wife a house. I'm going to set up a fund for their kids to go to college. And I'm going to send them money so that they could go see them every month. So why rat me out? And I'm going to hire them the best lawyer. We have lawyers on call. We're spending $500,000 a month just to have lawyers on call. We hire the best lawyers in the world. Names I can give you.
Okay, and you said that, at one point, you said around 78, 77, you paid over $1 million a month to buy corruption. What does that mean exactly? Because you had mentioned that you had bought off the Costa Rican president, Luis Monge Alvarez?
Monge. Yeah, Monge.
Monge.
Yeah, Monge. Yeah, Luis Monge.
So you paid off Luis Monge Alvarez, the president of Costa Rica.
We had a contact in Costa Rica named Alejo Aguilar, who was one of the directors of the World Bank. And through him, we donated $1 million. We were going to buy the Playboy Hotel in Costa Rica. We donated $1 million to his campaign. So we knew that we could buy anything that we wanted in Costa Rica. So $1 million, let's go back to that. Today we call it lobbyists. I call it corruption. So what happened? Who do we have? Literally, we have people on the payroll. We had, at the state level, literally we could buy a lot, in the area of Miami, just about all the law enforcement at the state level. The hardest people to buy that we never could buy was the FBI or the DEA. But at the state level, we could. I'm sure right now Border Patrol is being bought left and right by the cartels. We bought judges at the state level, and we had some judges at the federal level. We have politicians on our payroll. When they started to bring balloons, what they call it, to interdict airplanes coming from Colombia, they would put these 2 balloons. Well, in between, they couldn't touch each other, so there was an alley in between the balloons. So what the government did is, whenever they felt like it, they would move the balloons, right? So the alley would change. Well, I think within 5 minutes of the alley being changed, I knew the new coordinates. So we had, and everywhere our airplanes flew over, every country, Dominican Republic, Costa Rica, the Bahamas. We have people paid off. And then we had a lot of people back then in that time in the CIA paid off.
In 1979, after going through the whole situation with Noriega, you get extradited back into the U.S.
Correct.
What happens next?
So I get charged with heading the largest drug conspiracy in the United States. Never had a ticket. Never even a driving ticket. So I go in front of this judge, and he looks at me, and he said, the government says, we want $7 million bail. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, holy cow. Now think about it. There was never, the only reason you gave people high bails was for murder, right? Because they were danger to the community. That's the only way you could justify. There was never no bail given, and nothing bigger than $50,000 to any drug dealer ever. And I'm like, I'm 23 years old. I got braces. And I'm like sitting there looking at my attorney and like, what are they talking about? So the U.S. attorney goes ahead and says, the judge sets it at $2 million. So I go to my attorney and say, I can pay for that. And he's like, no, you can't. He said, you set that bail tomorrow. He said, they'll keep that $2 million, raise the bail, and use that against you. So I'm like, all right. And at this time now, I had the most expensive drug lawyers in the world. Marty Weinberg out of Boston. I mean, we hired Alan Dershowitz to do my bail appeal, as a matter of fact, because no one had ever been denied bail for that. So the reason they ended up denying it is because this judge said to traffic in drugs to the level that Mr. Valdes does, not only is he a danger to his community, but his community is the whole United States. And that's how they gave me that bail. So I couldn't set it, no matter. But now, mind you, here I am in Miami, no indictment, sworn complaint. They tried to go to the grand jury in Miami, no indictment returned. That's the Southern District. They go to Middle District, no indictment returned. Northern District, no indictment returned. Why? Because I didn't get caught in the United States with nothing. You know, this was cocaine in Panama, number one, that was already sold, so there's not even no evidence of the cocaine. And so we're sitting there, and we ended up, through my lawyer, we ended up buying a magistrate. Well, at least he told me he did. I don't know if it was just to take the $500,000 from me or not. And the bail gets reduced to $500,000. But immediately the government appealed it back to $2 million. So we're sitting there, and the judge says, I'm going to give the government 30 days to return an indictment, or I'm going to cut them loose. And they had never kept anyone on a sworn complaint ever that long. So they go ahead, and after 6 months, we go to the hearing, and the judge says to the U.S. attorney, do you have an indictment? He said, no, Your Honor. Judge said, cut him loose. And within 2 seconds, you hear this marshal coming. Hold him, arrest him, arrest him. There was just an indictment returned in the Middle District of Georgia. I'm like, what? I never even been to Georgia in my life. What do you mean in the Middle District of Georgia? What they did is my co-defendant, Harold Rosenthal, had a case pending where he had left, literally faked his death. And this guy was unbelievable. Comes to the court and tells the judge, he said, well, welcome, Mr. Rosenthal. He said, Your Honor, I'm the second Jew to come back from the dead. So he had this indictment pending. And what does the government do? They said that I was his partner. You know, that all the cocaine that this guy brought, when I had only met this guy 3 months earlier. So now we are going to go to court. Got the most powerful legal team. I remember the judge looking at me and said, Mr. Valdes, how can you say you're innocent when you have $1 million worth of lawyers sitting at your table? I had Shelby Heisman, who became a federal judge, whose brother-in-law was in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal. Marty Weinberg charged me $100,000 just to tell me whether he would take my case or not. So I'm spending $1 million and a half in attorneys, local counsel, and the government offers me a 2-year plea, which I could walk, because they had nothing on me. So our defense is this. I am a drug dealer. I'm the biggest drug dealer in the country. But what the hell did I do in Macon, Georgia? I have a constitutional right of venue. You got to try me. If anything, you got to try me in Miami. I've never been to Georgia, never planned to be to Georgia. So my attorney says, take the deal. I said, I'm not taking no deal from these bastards. They bring in the captain of the Bolivian Air Force, which was our, middleman between us and the Bolivian government. And they bring him, and they charge him. I put a lawyer for him, and they charge him with being the guy that supplied me the cocaine. We go to trial. The guy gets found innocent. I get found guilty. And I'm like, if this son of a bitch didn't sell anything, what did I buy? So my attorney says, we petitioned the court to sentence him under the Youth Offender Act. If you're younger than 25 and never committed a crime, ever, no felony, I didn't have a felony, misdemeanor, nothing, you have which would limit the amount of sentence you get. The judge said, not only do I believe that Mr. Valdes would not benefit from the Youth Offender Act, I don't think he's going to benefit from the 15 years I'm going to give him right now. Now, 15 years now is nothing. You look at all the sentences that are horrific and unbelievable, but 15 years at that time, every person I went, it was the highest sentence in that prison. And I was $250,000 fine, 15 years parole, and I went to prison. And people said, well, prison definitely changed. I said, man, I got to be honest with you. I had a blast in prison. I was making the same amount of money I was making before. I had a woman. I had everything I wanted. I was surrounded by guys. First prison I walked into, half the guys that worked for me or someone that worked for me, they even had a big old cake waiting for me. They said, welcome home, boss. So I had a blast in the prison. I went to Tallahassee for 2 years, and then I was transferred to Eglin Air Force Base. When I got there, they took me straight to the warden's office and said, how the hell did you get here? Because my case was called original jurisdiction, which means you are the head of a crime family. So I'm saying, I'm like, warden, you'll transfer me. I have a clean record, never done anything wrong. And he's like, who did you pay off? I said, you mean you pay people off in the Federal Bureau of Prison? Well, yeah, we paid $50,000 to the guy that was the designating officer at that time. And I got sent to Eglin, and at Eglin was just even worse, man. At Eglin, I was like living the life. At Eglin, they first tell me, you're not going to ever leave the camp. Because at Eglin, most of the inmates, like 1/10 work inside the prison camp, cutting the grass and all that. Then the other 9/10 work out in the federal base. And it's great because you're out there with military, you're loose, you're all over the biggest Air Force base in the world. Well, they look at me like, don't you ever think that you're going to leave the camp. Fine. So I got me a job working, in the dental office as a dental hygienist. And it was great, man. It was just good hours. And anyway, they ended up suspecting that I was having an affair with the dental hygienist. Next thing you know, they transferred me to the base. So I get into the base, and they give me this big old redneck. And he's like, boy, I'm going to make your life miserable. I said, no, you're not. You think you are, but no, you're not. He said, well, we'll see. So we're in charge of cleaning the grass around the general's houses. Had a big old truck. We kept all our equipment in there. So one day I walked up to him and I said, sir, I have a suggestion for you. I'll give you $1,000 a week. You pick me up. You take me, check me out of the prison with my crew, and then just bring me back when we have to come back and leave me alone. Who the hell do you think you are? I mean, like, really got tough on me. I'm like, all right, I'm telling you, I'm making you a good deal. So come Friday, we go back. So he's taking us at 3 o'clock. He's checking us in. He goes back to his truck, and all of the lawnmowers and them Toros, about $40,000 worth of equipment had disappeared. Man, he comes running like, where the hell is my equipment? I said, ask my guys, man, in the back of the truck. He's like, Valdes. I said, look, ask my guys. It was there about 2 minutes ago. So if someone stole it, you guys must have stolen it. So he looked at me, and he's like, pulled me aside. He said, this is my whole retirement. If I get to pay that money back, I'm dead. I said, well, I'll make you a deal. If you take my original offer and leave me alone, come Monday, if I can find who stole your equipment, I'll give you the $40,000. Well, I was there all weekend wondering, man, I hope that someone didn't run. We hid it by the beach at the Air Force, covered up with old palm trees and stuff, and we're like, man, I hope someone didn't run into the Toros. And sure enough, it was there Monday, and then he let me be. I ended up meeting a girl in prison, and who I ended up marrying, and she used to come and pick me every day on my detail. And I got so bold that I had an apartment 3 miles from the Air Force Base. And I bought from a high-ranking officer, I bought a sticker for a van. I bought a brand new van, and I put the sticker like if I was related to one of the generals or colonels, so not to give much away. So I'd come in and out of the base. I used to say, man, if a drug dealer comes in and out of this base like he owns the place, I wonder what the damn Russians are doing. And so I remember when I left, I did every bit of it, and this lieutenant friend of mine came and said, George, come tell me the truth, man. I'm already outside the prison. He says, were you seeing your wife? I said, yeah. I said, where? We've been looking for you all over the place. And I said, where were you looking? He says, all over this base. I said, that's your problem. I was outside the base. He said, you didn't have the balls, did you? I said, every freaking day I left this base and came back.
Okay, so you end up doing the whole 15 years?
I ended up doing 5, which is the most you could do unless you get into an incident in the prison back then under the old laws. You do one third of your sentence.
You only had to do a third.
Yeah, I didn't get no halfway house or nothing like that people get.
Okay, so you come out of prison in 1986?
85.
85, okay. So you come out of prison in 85, and you were running a drug operation in prison the whole time.
I was running him at the beginning of the prison sentence, like the first, I would say 8-9 months. I was running the cartel, but then I knew I was going to go away. It was going to be very difficult, and I handed it over to this guy that I literally had grown up with all my life, who I made who he was, and I trusted him tremendously. I told him, I said, look, I'll make you a deal. You don't have to give me $1. I'll tell you where to buy it, how to bring it, who I pay off, the airplanes, I mean, literally the entire infrastructure. I said, I'll leave you the money for 30 kilos. All you got to do is just bring 30 kilos for me on every load, sell it, save my money, so when I get out, I don't know when, I'll have some money. By God's grace, they robbed me. But, it was very, very interesting because a lot of things happened had they not. One of them right now, which is the main guy that I grew up with, he's in Florence, about maybe 5 cells away from El Chapo, doing 300 years. And they became the biggest drug dealers in Miami during that period. Very, very well-known, Sal and Willie, very notorious. And they were different than I was. Very, very, very different, They became world champion boat racers, all that. And I used to look at them and I'm like, why would you do this, man? We're drug dealers. We're not freaking athletes. We're not celebrities. You're flaunting all this in front of this guy. You think they're going to just let you get away? So it was a big trial, and they bribed the jury, killed some witnesses, and it ended up a tragic story. But the great thing for me, and it was a big betrayal because when I came out of prison, they said to me that they had no money for me. Well, when I get arrested the second time, eventually the government called me to be a witness in the trial, and they called me to be a witness in the trial. One of the reason they called me is because I could honestly swear that their defense was that when I retired, shortly thereafter they retired. And their defense was, if we had not retired, when George came out, he would have been with us. And I could literally say, I didn't. So as far as I was concerned, they retired or they're son of a bitches who stole.
Okay, so you get out in 1985, and you get right back in the drug business again.
Yeah, right before getting out, I started putting my organization together. I knew I was getting out because I was doing it every day of the 5 years. So I started putting my organization together. I even had some of my customers come from California, and everyone knew that I was tortured. I took everything that they had, never said a word on anybody. So my reputation was impeccable. And I went back and I started on my own. Originally I was supposed to have taken over that organization again. But when they did that to me, I'm like, fine. So, but the interesting thing, I didn't have to. I was a multimillionaire. I could have just lived in my ranch and actually ended up making a lot of money. I was making $1 million a year racing quarter horses, breeding quarter horses. Because I always had a mind for business. So I didn't look at this like I'm a drug dealer, This just happens to do what I do. I'm a businessman and the product today is cocaine. But my mind was always that I wasn't going to do this for the rest of my life. And I was going to go completely legitimate. Because that was originally my goal when they first got involved with them. I'm going to do a year, make $100,000 and leave. So I started my organization again. And then within 6 months, I was making millions of dollars.
Okay, so now you're back in the cocaine business again, but now Pablo Escobar is the prominent figure out of Colombia. And were you dealing directly with Escobar?
I was dealing with all of them, yeah. At this time now, when I get out, so I'm still dealing with Manuel, right? My godfather. He's my main guy in Colombia. So what we would do on a plane, So let's say I'm bringing 500 kilos. So we would bring 200 for us, for Manuel and me. And then we would say, okay, we're going to split up the other 3, 100 for Pablo, 100 for Gacha, and 100 for another guy, Frank Jimenez, who was bigger than all of them, and no one ever knew about him. And that's how we did it. We split it. But even Pablo did not even really, by this time, he became very notorious because of the war that he started with the government, right? But that was like shortly after that I got out, that he became. And really what made Pablo, people call him the head of the cartel, which he was by no means. He was the head of his family. Every family had their own accountant, their own buyers, seller, transportation, their own assassins. Pablo had his group, Manuel had his group, the Ochoas had their group. Gacha, who was really bigger and wealthier than Pablo, had his group. The thing about it was that Pablo was the one that was the most notorious, right? He's the one that became the most flamboyant in the sense of he took over the war, what he considered a war. I talked to him many, many times, and his thing was, listen, I'm in a war. I didn't call this war, the government did. Because his whole thing was this extradition. His whole thing was, why should they take me to the United States and charge me for a crime, which will be conspiracy, right? Because unless you get caught with anything in your hand, you will be charged with conspiracy. But see, only in the United States that law exists. So he's like, look, George, it's like if they would take me to India because I killed a cow in Colombia, I'm not going to go. He says, these people will take me horizontally, but never vertically. So I have my theory about how Pablo died because I talked to him 2 weeks before he died. So anyway, with that, so lately...
Wait, hold on one sec. So if you spoke to Escobar 2 weeks before he died, he was already on the run and already being hunted and so forth. Like he was, because I remember watching Narcos and seeing how that whole thing played out. He was really in very deep hiding and wanted all over the world by this point.
Narcos is a pretty good series. It's fun. I enjoy it. But I can tell you another one that is really a lot more real than Narcos. I'm not saying that it ain't the way it is, but it just happened that I know a lot of stuff that went on that didn't go on. So, yeah, he's hiding most of the time, right? Because believe it or not, a lot of the time he was right underneath their nose. I mean, when he would go to this little town where he was from, where he built all these houses. See, he took this, Colombia was one of the last countries to, legalize abortion. If you didn't want a child, you would go to this place where he lived, put him in a cardboard box, put him in the corner of that neighborhood with the dump where you see in the movie where he built the best soccer field in Colombia. So he went in there and he took all these people that literally were living in cardboard boxes, in shacks. And he built, 500 homes. Well, he made all of us pay. But he built 500 homes. He built the best hospital. He built, a soccer stadium. He built great schools for them. So to these people, Pablo was God, right? And that's the whole thing about my whole notion. How do we fight the war on drugs? But not to get off subject. So he could be right there in front of everybody. Ain't nobody's going to say nothing. I mean, he took out an ad that $5,000 for every police officer that pointed a finger at him. So if he go by the middle of Medellin, which he did, like in Narcos where they say that he was hiding in the jungle all the time, I say he was hiding in the jungle maybe half the time. He'd drive right through the streets of Medellin, and if any cop ever there look at him, $5,000. He killed I don't know how many cops. It was crazy, the power that he ended up having and the fear that he instilled in those people.
He was also killing politicians, and that's when it really went over the line.
It went over the line. It all started, and I don't think he would have become who he became had this incident not happened. He ran and became like the equivalent of us congressman. And his idea was to really do good for the people. When you take countries, this is how Fidel got elected. You go to a country where 90% of the capital is owned by 5% of the people. Everybody else is starving. Of course, it's easy for communism to come in. And that's what Pablo was against. But because he had a lot of power, this one guy who became the equivalent of our attorney general, minister of justice, ended up bringing out that he was a drug dealer, and he literally embarrassed the hell out of him in front of the chamber, and then he signed his death sentence. And then the thing is, and that's what happened. You kill one person, and you end up killing another and another, and before you know it, it didn't matter to him anymore. But his intentions were righteous to begin with. I mean, I don't want to say, listen, this is really a critical thing, because I always like to clarify. He turned out to be an animal. And the killing that he did and what he did to the most beautiful country in the world is unforgivable. But that he did a lot of good, we want to wipe that out. Listen, why is the government not build houses for the poor people? Help all those poor people. The bananas, why were we easy to import and get people to start growing cocaine for us? And this is the problem today. Well, we went to the people growing bananas, and they're like, how much do you get paid to grow bananas? And they're like, we get $100 an acre, not enough to even survive. We said, screw the banana, we're going to pay you $1,000. We're going to build you schools, we're going to build you churches, we're going to build you hospitals. Who are they going to deal with? Who are they going to go with? So my question is, why do we have a drug problem in Latin America? Because of the exploitation by the multinational of the poor people. And that's what happens. And the corruption that exists. Where these people, all these politicians get rich, and the poor people, they're dead broke.
Well, at one point, Pablo Escobar actually put a hit on your life.
I said that there was a guy that was more powerful than Pablo. And they call him El Negro. And we brought a lot of cocaine for him. The story goes, and I don't know exactly because it could be a legend, but the story goes that at a Christmas party, he got drunk, El Negro, who was a very decent guy, probably the best guy I ever dealt with. And he made a comment that, yeah, Pablo's got a lot of reputation, but I got all the money. And then the story goes that Pablo had him killed. So Pablo had him killed, and had him killed. If Pablo had you killed, he would kill every male in your family, right? Because they could come back one day. So a guy that used to be my contact with El Negro in the United States was a guy named Victor, who was one of the biggest assassins in Colombia, but a very straight-up guy, honorable businessman. And he called me up, and he's like, I need to bring El Negro's son or brother, 11-year-olds at that time, to Miami, because the only house he will be safe is your house. So he came to live in my house, and for 2 years, until one day his mother said, hey, it's okay for him to come back. I'm like, no, it's not. I said, he's going to be safe while he's in my house, but if he goes back, they're going to kill him. Well, she said, I talked, it's all arranged. They took him, they killed him at the airport. So this guy, Victor, had tremendous respect for me. So fast track. We bring the first drug, the first cocaine ever to come from Mexico, from Colombia, we brought it. And we're bringing it, and we're supposed to land in Juarez, Mexico, okay? And there's an operation going on, and they ended up landing the airplane in Houston, in a strip in Houston. And what happened is we always would send a Mexican, or when it was the United States, we send an American with the Colombian pilot, so that he would show them how to get here. Same thing that we did for the American. There will be a Colombian pilot that would come to U.S. and take him, so that the American never knew where he was going to go in case he had turned snitch, and the pilot would bring him into the strip. So that was a way to protect. Well, time passes, nothing happened. Then I get a call from Victor. And he said, I need to see you. I'm like, okay. So he said, I'll meet you at Daily Mall. And I go there, and I'm like, okay, so what's up? He's like, we have a problem. I have a contract to kill you. Now, this guy knew my reputation, but he knew what I did for his boss family. He was deeply indebted for me. And I said, what's the problem? He said, well, the word is, it wasn't Pablo who put the contract. It was his cousin who didn't like me at all. And I'll tell you the story how that came about. He said, they said that you disrespected him, that you used their strip and without permission. So apparently what happened is when someone found out that that strip had been used, the guy that was there in Houston, well, outside of Houston, where the airplane landed, went ahead and told them that I said it was okay to use the strip. I had no clue about any of that. Let's retract to a year earlier. A year earlier, Pablo comes up to me and says, I have a great deal. I got a great business idea. I'm like, all right. He said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to start offering insurance on the load. I'm like, insurance? He said, yeah, if the load gets lost, we return the cocaine in Colombia. I said, well, we've never lost a load, but why would we do that? He said, because we can charge 10,000 versus 7,000. So if we bring in 300 kilos for people, 500 kilos, that's $1.5 million in just insurance. And I'm like, really, what's the deal? He said, okay, here's the deal. Every third load, we're going to tell people that the load got lost. I'm like, I don't understand. He said, yeah. So I'm going to say that the load went down, and I'm going to return the cocaine to them in Colombia. At this time, cocaine was like $10,000. I'll return the cocaine to them in Colombia, but we're going to already have it in the United States at $40,000. And we didn't invest $1 to get it there. So I looked at him, and I'm like, man, I can't participate. Well, what are you talking about? Nobody gets hurt. I said, I understand that, but it's a lie. I said, and if I join you on this lie, what's going to happen one day when someone tells you something and you're going to believe him because you think that I'm a liar? Well, his cousin didn't like that attitude. He thought that I had a self-righteous attitude. I said, look, you can bring in all the loads you want. You can sell all the insurance you want. Nobody knows me that I'm giving it to him, so I couldn't care less. And they did. I don't know how many insurance that they sold. We never ended up losing a load. And he didn't only do that with me. He did that with everybody he brought in coke with. So we went ahead and then, so I told Victor, get him on the phone. So Pablo always had a satellite phone. So he gets him on the phone, and I said, look, there's a big misunderstanding here. First and foremost, I had no clue that that was your strip. Second of all, if I did, I would have asked you for it. I'm sure you would have given it to me. I said, third of all, you know something. I don't lie, man. So that was the end of that deal. I don't know what happened to that other guy, the guy in Mexico, but no one ever saw him again. But, you know, and that's what I had tried all my life to go by. That people knew that Jorge Valdes, when he could tell you yes is yes, no is no, and that I would die for my word. And there's just, to me, that there was just no value to that. You know, there's no monetary value you can put on integrity. And that's why I look at this world today. People lie, and it's okay to lie. Truth doesn't matter. And I'm like, man, I'm a fish out of water. Because if truth doesn't matter, what matters?
Well, at one point, your ex-wife, Sherry, wrote a letter to the U.S. attorney and basically ratted you out and told them everything that she knew about your drug operation.
Well, what ended up happening, I was at a horse show. We had a big horse operation. She called me with a friend of hers, cheating on her, and she became, you know, hell has no fury like a woman scorned, and rightfully so. But so I go to this horse show, and I bought this big customized dually that I was going to drive back, and I called the ranch, and my ranch manager's wife said to me, your wife has been at the office making copies all day long. So I'm like, all right, don't tell anything. So I got on an airplane. So I called her. She said, when are you coming home? I said, I'll be there in a couple of days. So I flew, and she had taken the kids to the beach. So I went to the house, and sure enough, I found this big sack of papers, and it had copies of everything. But the worst part was that she wrote a letter detailing everybody's name. Now, that was the stupidest thing in the world, because in reality, that is like an automatic death sentence. And I looked at her when she came, I threw the bag at her. I said, do you realize something? You realize that you just signed a death sentence on your mom and on you and on everybody. And if I keep this secret and sometime it ever gets out that I knew about this freaking letter, I'm dead. I said, because here's the deal. They don't give a shit that the government knows who they are. The government knows who they all are. But their theory is real simple. The dead cannot talk. And as long as you not ever have a chance to get in front of a judge, and it was, you know, we definitely, at that time, we broke up, and we were already in Shady Rocks and separated, never united again. But it was very painful because I did not tell about it. And I lived with that it was going to come back to haunt me. Thank God that not too long after that, I decided I was going to walk away.
Well, you decided that you're going to walk away, but then you get raided by the feds.
Well, and what happened before that, so my mother constantly, all the time, son, what you're doing doesn't please God. Son, what you're doing doesn't please God, right? I tell people, my mother should have taught a class on tough love, because here was my mom. I can't believe you done this, you destroyed it, you done this, blah, blah, blah. And then she's like, what do you want for dinner today, son? So she would let me know how she thought about the choice I made. She never stopped letting me know that I was her son. two things happened. Number one, I'm supposed to go to California one day. I went to get on my airplane, and when I went to take a step, I started to throw up and diarrhea. And I was sick as a dog. And I'm like, man, I didn't eat anything. I got breakfast waiting for in the airplane. So I went into the office at the hangar, came back out, and when I felt better, came back out. The minute I put a foot, again, same thing. And so I told Eddie, the guy that was with me, I said, look, you go. I'm going to throw up all over this airplane. Just tell him I'm going to go next week. He went, and he got murdered. There was a contract waiting on me, and they killed him instead of me. And I remember at the funeral, I'm waiting there at the funeral, and I had just baptized his daughter, which is about a little older than my daughter. And she looked at me and she said, Godfather, my daddy went to be with Jesus. And I'm like, man, he does with Jesus. We definitely ain't going there, number one. But number two is, when would my daughter say that to someone and I'll never see her? Because at this time now, I thought that I was going to get killed any day. So shortly thereafter, another event happens where I'm partying with some Hollywood celebrities. And my ex-wife drops the baby at the ranch. And my bodyguards called me, head of security called me, and like, you won't believe this, your daughter's here. So I'm like, well, bring her to a house. I called the maid. At that time, it was 10,000 square foot, 15,000 square foot house. I called the maid. I said, look, put her in the room, and I'll have breakfast with her tomorrow. And I went back to my room, and I, partying away, at 2 o'clock in the morning, she began to knock. And she was like, Daddy, it's Crystal. Daddy, it's Crystal. And I have no way to explain this short of, if you have a daughter or a son, he's drowning on a boat, and you're trying to reach him, and you can't touch their fingertips as they die. I felt so filthy. I felt so corrupt. I felt like here's the only thing that is holy and in my life and pure, and if I open the door, I'm going to contaminate her. And I chased everyone. I told all the women to get out. They went together. I said, no, get out the window. I chased them out. I went into a shower, and for the first time in my life, a guy that they said ice ran through his veins. I began to scrub the filth off of me. And I went underneath my sheets, and I started shivering. When I thought that she had stopped crying, I went by the door, and there she was crying in the floor. And I said, you know what? My life will change today. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what change was. All I knew was that if I'm going north, I'm going to go south. If I'm going east, I'm going to go west. But I just can't continue like that. I had all the money in the world, all the power in the world, all the women in the world, and I was the most miserable human being in the world. I come to realize not too long ago, I wrote a letter, said, I'm a multimillionaire at the age of 23, and I'm looking for someone to kill me. And I look back at the things that I did, and that's what I was looking for, because I had this void within me that I thought, and society tells you, look, money's going to fill, power's going to fill women. Well, I'm dating the most beautiful supermodels in the world, and I'm empty. I'm devastated. My life everyone wants to be me. I look in the ceiling, and I hate my life. And I called in the morning. I called Manuel. I said, I'm done. Now, imagine the desperation of my life to make that call when I knew that I probably had a month to live. Why? Well, we really didn't have a very good retirement program in the cartel. So, again, going back to the same thing, one of the things they cannot put up with is the unknown. So they're saying to themselves, I put myself in their position. They're like, all right, George is making $1 million for doing nothing. At this time, it had been probably a year since I seen cocaine. All I do is pay off the high contacts that I have, and then just say, send the plane or don't send the airplane. That's it. And 10 days later, I get $1 million, $2 million. And they're like, why would he walk away with that? There's no operations going on. There's no investigation going on. Something is wrong. And that's what I thought. I walked away. I moved from Miami to live in my ranch, and I had left for 3.5 years. And then I hired this guy to teach me karate. I'd done karate forever. And while I was getting my black belt, I remember the first day he says to me, man, I'm going to teach you about the sword. And I'm like so excited, man. I love weapons. You know, I had a ton of Uzi submachine guns. You know, we're not going to start with this bullshit of throwing kicks and punches. We're going to go right to the weapon. He turns around and pulls out a Bible. I mean, I'm like, dude, you don't understand something. I don't believe in that stupid book. I don't believe what the book talks about. You take that book home, and tomorrow you take that stupid sword and bring the real sword. And he got up within about a foot of my face, and he's like, young man, what I got to give you, you got no money to pay. Instantly, I reached behind my belt, see if I had my gun with me. I'm like, damn, I ain't got a gun. I don't see no bodyguard. This guy's a 7-degree black belt. He's going to start beating the Bible into me. I said, well, dude, don't get excited, man. Don't get excited. We're going to turn on the heat, the steam room, and while it steams up, go ahead, read that stuff to me. And people say, what made you change your life? What did he say? I said, honestly, not a damn thing. Because the truth of the matter, I was getting over the ass whooping he had given me for 2 hours to ever think about what he was telling me. But it was something very intriguing. This guy lived in a very little world. He had this little bitty house that I would consider shack, probably 800,000 square feet. My guest house was 5,000. He had an old beat-up car. I had $1 million worth of cars in my driveway. And he had this joy and this happiness that I could not understand. And every time I would say, he's like, no, I got this intimate relationship with this guy named Jesus. I'm like, man, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm surrounded by hundreds of people, and I can't have a relationship with nobody. So I was just so miserable wondering, why is this guy happy? It's impossible. No one can live in this shitty little world he lives in and be happy. Look at my world. I have a $1 million house in Vail, a $2 million house in Fort Myers Beach, $15 million, $20 million ranch now, jets, helicopter, and I'm miserable, and you tell me? And then he tells me, and I've been married to the same woman for 25 years, and I'm so in love with her, and I'm like, no, that's it. Something seriously wrong there. So he says to me, I've been married to the same woman for 25 years, and I'm so in love with her. And I'm like, no, this guy's got to be on some Japanese drugs, man. Because I go to bed with this gorgeous woman. I hate every single one of them. And this guy loves one that's 40-some-odd years old. Are you crazy? But 3.5 years happened, and it was when my final divorce was over that I was in such desperation as I saw my ex-wife drag my daughter away, July 1st, that I went into my room, and I'm like, God, first and foremost, I want to tell you this. I don't believe in you, number one. Number two, I don't believe you're real. Number three, if you are, you're looking at me and say, George, you're so damn bad. I don't want you up here. I said, but change my life, man, because if not, kill me. Well, 3 months later, I was at a horse show when the feds came in, and they arrested me in Illinois, Springfield, Illinois, or Missouri. Forgot where it was, somewhere like that, in 1990. It was September of 1990. And I had no idea why. I mean, I walked away for 3.5 years. So they take me to Atlanta, from Atlanta to Mobile, Alabama. And so here's the answer. So they arrest me at lunchtime, so I missed lunch. They take me in front of the judge so that I could go ahead and waive extradition. I missed dinner. They picked me up early in the morning to take me to Atlanta. I missed breakfast. In Atlanta, they picked me up to take me to Mobile, Alabama. I missed lunch. So I got to Mobile, Alabama, and I no clue what I'm being charged with, what I'm arrested with, or nothing. And there's my lawyer. That's been my lawyer forever. And he's like, I got great news for you. Now, usually I'm not expecting good news in a federal building, And he's like, you're going to walk away from this. The government has got no case on you. I said, really? He said, yeah. The only witness against you last night, while he was a government witness, killed himself. He was trying to land an airplane, a DEA airplane full of cocaine in the fog, and killed himself. Go in there and tell me you're innocent, and we're going to walk. And I was so desperate in my life that I felt that I had to change my life. And I looked at him and said, I can't freaking fight these people anymore, man. I am miserable, man. And I want to change my life. I want a different life. He's like, dude, if you plead guilty, you will die in a federal prison. Because what happened, I walked away in February of 87. And the law changed in December or November of 87. So the 15-year maximum they could give you for conspiracy now was 3 life sentences. Conspiracy to import, conspiracy to possess what you were going to import, conspiracy to distribute what you were going to possess that you were going to import, even though nothing happened. A conversation. So I said, look, man, I got to come clean about my life. I'm done. I knew that I couldn't hurt anyone. Statute of limitations had run out on everybody. So I went in front of the prosecutor, and she's like, little money, lots of time. Lots of money, little time. It was a time also that the U.S. attorney officers were being graded by how much money they forfeited. They were able to get in forfeiture, right? So I'm like, you know how much I got? And she's like, no, but I know who does. She opened the door, and here comes his agents, and they knew to the penny how much toilet paper I spent. They had spent 4 years following me, literally, and doing a whole forensic accounting of my life. And we won it all. And they couldn't take any of it because on the first case, they couldn't take it. Statute of limitations ran out. It was all legitimate money now. And I tell people, you know how long it takes to go from being worth $40, $50 million to nothing? About a minute. And that's how long it takes you to sign over everything you own. And I went back into that cell, and it was really interesting. So I hear this guy screaming, Milky Way, Milky Way. And I'm like, that's why I told you, I missed all those meals, right? I'm hungry like hell. And I'm like, Milky Way, man. He said $1. Apparently it was like a big commodity in prison. And I'm like, holy shit. 2 hours ago, I was worth $50, $60 million. I ain't got a freaking dollar to buy a Milky Way. And so no deal with the government. The only deal was that my attorney asked them that they would charge me with the parole violation, that I was going to plead guilty. So I was on the parole for 15 years, right? I had done 5 years, so I had 5 years left. With 10 years left, which I would do 5. 10 years left on the parole. And they're like, all we recommend is that you charge him under the old law when he committed the crimes. He wasn't part of this conspiracy here. And the judge at the beginning said to me he was going to sentence me to a life sentence. I couldn't care less. I was in numb space. And I ended up getting 10 years, of which I served 4. But, I talk a lot of, one of the things I do now is talk about mindset, the mindset of an individual. I went in that prison and I said, I have a choice. I can do like the rest of my buddies and sleep 12 hours, because in prison, if you sleep 12 hours, you sleep half of your sentence away. So that's what they thought. Or I'm going to do something with my life. I don't know how long I'm going to be here. It might be 10. It might be whatever. So I decided to go back to school and to study. And when everybody was quiet, about 5 o'clock in the morning, I was reading and taught myself Greek, finished another bachelor's, half of a master's. And when I was released, I finished my master's and then earned a PhD.
So you were facing 8 life sentences during this second bust. You end up getting 10, and you did 4.
Yeah. And 8 life sentences, is 3 counts, right? Or 3 charges divided into 3 counts, 3 conspiracy. But this is what they use to pressure you to plead guilty and give them, because it's sort of like you're flipping a coin, right? You think you're innocent. There is no witness against you. All of a sudden, you lose. You're charged. Because technically, though, rightfully, they could charge me with those life sentences because I had quit in 87 with that group. But they kept going. And under the RICO statute, the continued criminal enterprise, it doesn't matter if you stopped 20 years ago. If the people that you dealt with continued in that enterprise, you're just as guilty as them. And the guy was a friend of mine that I met in prison, Dickie Lynn, and it was 165 people indictment. He was the last guy, and he ended up getting a life sentence. So I could have gotten, if they pressured, I could have gotten the life sentence.
Well, you did your 4 years. You get out in 1995.
4.5, yeah.
4.5. In total, you did 10 years in prison,
Correct.
Which was a quarter of your life at that point. Once you get out in 1995, you're completely done with the drug business?
Oh, I was done with the drug business in 87. That's why I moved away from it. This is one of the things I tell people. You want to change your life? Change your environment. First thing you got to do. Because if you go back to where you lived and where all your friends are, it's easy to pull you back. It's like people think that recidivism rate is so high because people don't change in prison. That's bullshit. Here's the problem. I'll tell you my perfect example. I'll be 100% honest. If I got out of prison and I couldn't feed my family, no matter what I did, because nobody was going to hire me. I had this label, twice convicted drug dealer. Nobody would hire me. And I couldn't wait to feed my family. What do you think I was going to do? I was going to go back to Miami and do what I know how to do, deal drugs. And that's what happened. People change in prison. They want to start a new life. They don't want to go through that life. But society doesn't give them a chance. Why? Because massive incarceration is nothing but inventory, right? Their bodies. So I thank God that I decided to study. So I became a fanatic. So I graduated 4.0. And then when I got accepted to do a PhD, when I graduated, I was one of 5 Hispanics in the whole country. So I was recruited by every university to teach with a great salary. I have been teaching already at Wheaton College, which I'm still adjunct professor. But my father died. And when my father died, I got really convicted. My father died right a week before my wedding. And I'm missing him. I'm crying tremendously. And I'm like, man, my father didn't give me anything. Why am I missing him so much? Then I realized, you know what? He did. He gave me a lot. He gave me his presence. He was with me. He helped me walk through life. And I adore my father. He was my hero. My bodyguard used to laugh. My father would come to my house, and we loved to watch movies together. And he would say, hey, son, what time is it? And I'm like, Dad, it's almost 10 o'clock. He says, you busy tomorrow? I say, yeah, Dad, I'm busy tomorrow. He would say, son, I think you need to go to bed. You know what I did? I went to bed. And my bodyguard's like, man, presidents bow down before you, and your father's sending you to bed like a little kid? I said, yeah, because that's the respect I have for my father. They said, do you fear your father? I said, I do, but not fear that he's going to kill me or anything like that. I fear ever letting the man I love the most down. So I'll go to bed. Makes no difference in my life. So when I got out and I'm missing my father, I realized, yeah, I'm going to be this big, because now there's no internet, right? So no one, my whole deal is no one's going to know about me. I'm going to get my PhD, I'm going to teach, and I'm going to have a bunch of pretty girls begging me for a grade. Greatest thing in life. That's what I want to do. And no one's going to know who Jorge Valdes is. And all of a sudden, I realized I got 3 kids from a prior marriage living in Georgia. And I'm like, how are my kids going to remember me? As someone who sent a check every month and had a good time? So I told my wife, I said, I'm going to quit. And we're going to move to Georgia. I'm going to be a full-time dad. And she's like, what are you going to do there? I said, I don't know. I'll figure it out. And so we did. And I started a little company in the basement of our house, and I built it into a multi-million-dollar national, international company. And then in 2012, I decided that I was done. I'm like, if a man can define when enough is enough, only greed will drive him. And I want to be there for the last 2 kids. I got 6. My first 4 kids spent most of their lives, I was in prison. So I retired, and that's what I did.
Were there any actual hits on your life or attempts on your life?
No, so here's the interesting thing. When I came out of prison, a year after I came out of prison, the Medallîn Cartel went to war with the Cali cartel, and the Medallîn Cartel got wiped out. I was at my father's house, and I get a call from this lawyer needs to see me. And I've been out of prison for a year. It was the summer. I was visiting my parents. And so he comes to see me, and he's like, I'm representing such and such, one of the head of the Cali cartel. He said, I want to tell you something. You don't have to ever worry for your life. We know how you stood up and didn't tell nothing. See, the farm where we landed and refueled in Colombia from Bolivia, that farm belonged to a young man that was one of the highest ranking members of the Cali cartel. And I could have taken him down if I had ever said his name. But they knew, because they went to Panama and they caught the guy that tortured me. And I'm like, you didn't do this to honor me. You did this because I'm 23 years old and you're wondering what the hell did I say? He said, well, we do. We know those people are animals. And my godfather said to me, look, my nephew went to Peru to make a drug deal, and I had to spend $25,000 to eventually get him, and they sent him to me in a box cut up in 4 pieces. So we thought you would have talked. So I created that reputation.
You know, when you think about the tons of cocaine that you helped distribute into the United States, you know, at the time when you first started, cocaine was a rich man's drug. No one thought it was addicting. It was a party drug, not a big deal. You look in 2020, at the chaos that all that cocaine has created. Like, for example, I've never tried cocaine myself because at 23 years old, my best friend overdosed and died on cocaine. And I remember going to that funeral and saying, I'm not going to try this. This stuff is too dangerous. Cocaine eventually became crack and ended up just destroying Black and Latino communities. Ended up creating crack babies. Ended up where kids would sell crack to their own mothers. People killed over it. People lost their lives and lost their freedom. When you think about the massive devastation that you created in order just to make money, as a born again Christian, how do you really deal with that these days?
I can correlate it. No matter what I do. So I've done a lot of youth outreach, and I preach a lot, and I work with youth a lot. And people say, So I'll give you an example. So I did this big event, and this girl comes to me and says, Dr. Valdez, would you pray for my baby? And I'm looking at this baby, and I'm like, yeah, can you tell me about it? And she said, yeah, my baby was born in the toilet of a crack house. Did not die because the toilet didn't flush. So don't think that breaks me. I live with that for the rest of my life, and rightfully so. And even though I live a great life now, I've gone through hell. I had a son overdose, and I had his mother call me December 25th, tell me he was dead. And by God's grace, he was saved. So we do things in life, and I tell people, I don't justify anything that I do I don't do what I do to make up for the wrong that I did. And even though I didn't think I was doing wrong to anybody, and it turned out to what it did, the only consolation for me, if any at all, and I didn't pay enough. Honestly, I should have died. But the only consolation was that when I saw what happened, that cocaine was no longer for the rich and famous, I walked away on my own. And there's no other case where anybody ever walks away from making that type of money and that power. But yeah, I live with that all my life. And I've seen horrific things, and I've gone through hell. And, I don't cry about it. Why? Because, I deserve it. See, people think that, God, I do wrong, and I'm going to ask God to forgive me. Yeah, but the thing about it is I see God in 3 dimensions, right? I see God omnipotent, and he can see and he knows everything. But I also see that God is merciful, but God is just. So what is justice? If Jorge Valdes gets away with all that he got away with, then God ain't just. The fact that I'm alive, well, it could be God's mercy, but justice is that you punish wrong and you reward righteousness, right? So I live with that. I'll live with that to the day that I die. And that's what I tell people. Sometimes we do things, we think that we're not hurting anybody. We think that we are doing something innocent. I mean, we used to joke about it. We used to say, hey, we're the Kennedys of the 20th century. They deal alcohol, we're dealing cocaine. But the truth is, yeah, I live with that pain every day of my life. And there's no way to make sense of it. There's nothing that I can do. There's nothing I can die 20 I can do 20 life sentences. I can die 20 times, still not make up for the wrong I did, right? So can I make sense of it? No. Can I thank God that I've gotten a different chance and that I get an opportunity to do some good and to make a difference in people's lives. We send millions of books. I've sent 100,000 books to prisons to try to get prisoners to not become Jorge Valdes. I work with youth, trying to help them raise awareness that, listen, you think that these choices you're making today, there's consequences to every bit of our choices. And yeah, I suffer consequences, not enough. But then how do you draw the line? What do you say is enough for what I did? Impossible for me to say. So I can't dwell in the past because I cannot be defined. My present, my future cannot be defined by my past, right? I am who I want. I did what I did, and there's nothing I can do to erase that. God knows that if I could, God knows that if I could go through Panama 100 times, and that was the most worst experience any human being can ever dream of, I'd do it all over again to try to erase that past, but there's none. So I can't live punishing myself every day. All I can do is, well, what can I do now with the gift that God's given me in the second chance to make a difference?
Well, Jorge Valdes, it's a hell of a story, and it's a hell of a life. You talked about in your book how you started out as the American dream and you became America's nightmare. I think that you take responsibility for what it is that you've done. You don't try to make excuses for it. And I think in the latter part of your years, you are trying to make up for the mistakes that you made. And at the end of the day, that's all we could do.
The interesting thing is that one of the things I do a lot is I deal with people's mindset, right? Because it's all about the mindset that you have. How do you look at the world? Just even like through this pandemic, people are like, why are you not afraid? Why are you looking at the way that you look at it? I said, because we don't realize all the pain that's in this world. This massive incarceration, I fight a lot about that to raise awareness that, listen, this is a mafia. We're locking up people that are not criminal. We're locking up people that have mental health issues that America ignores. See, we're worried right now in this pandemic about the health, the people are dying of the virus. I believe that the consequences of the mental health issues that we're going to deal with, the fear that mainstream media has put on people, the impact, the suicides, what they say, 891. So one of the things I'm doing to try to make it up is creating this, finally came up with the idea to do this journal, how to help people change their mind, talk about things, how do you look at the world, through what lenses do you look at the world? I call it the narco mindset journal, right? Look at the world through the lenses of fear, I tell people, listen, I don't want to hear the news anymore. Don't tell me how many people have died. There's nothing I can do about the people that have died. Nothing I can do about the people that died from what I have done. So talk to me about what I need to do as a citizen, right? And then I can't have fear. What can I do to better my life? What can I do to put myself in a position that if something like this happened, which I believe was going to happen for a long time, it's I'm protecting my family, I'm protecting myself, and I'm protecting those I can. And how do I help those that are in desperate need right now? We say we got to worry about lives over the economy. Well, dude, that's wonderful when you're a rich journalist and you're making so much money. I mean, you can be at home for 3 years. It's not going to impact you any. I was in a cell 3x8 for 10 years, so this distancing is nothing. How about that mom that can't feed the baby, man? We got to think about those people, and we're very reactive. And when we react, we overreact, right? We're not proactive. We got to look at the 70,000 kids that are dying of a drug overdose. I'm screaming that from the top of my lungs. No one gives a freaking damn, man. We got to do that, man. We got to stop this stupid war on drugs that is a joke. And let's help people, create clinics, deal with mental health. Mental health is a very, very big problem in America that we just ignore. And it's going to come and just going to bite us right in the face. But, you do the best you can and you pray, and then one day you die. I'm 64 now, so I never thought I'd get past 40, so I'm blessed.
Yeah, I mean, getting old is a gift.
It really is.
It really is, that a lot of people don't get to experience, unfortunately. We lost a lot of people in their 20s, especially in hip-hop. You lose a lot of people in their 20s and 30s and so forth. But Jorge Valdes, I appreciate you sharing, and just try to do your best to get through this hard time, and it seems like you're doing your best to make up for your prior mistakes. So I wish you the best, and I appreciate you coming to VladTV to tell your story.
Thanks so much, man. It's been a great pleasure, and I'd love to come back again. Have a wonderful day, and be safe.
Until next time.
All right.
Peace.